Welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'm your host, Simone Morris, and I have a passion for empowering others to take responsibility for their careers. Yes, I've written several books on owning your career and am loving hosting this podcast. This podcast is for you if you're willing to make a shift to the driver's seat in your career. We feature leaders who inspire, empower, and motivate you for consistent career action for results. Please continue to join us every Sunday when a new episode is released. Let's get into this week's show. Welcome to this week's episode of the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'm delighted today to welcome to the show Fran Pastore, who is the CEO and founder of the Connecticut Women's Development Center, an instrumental organization to empower women to get in the driver's seat, which is what this show is about. Fran, welcome to the show.
Hello, Simone, and thank you so much for having me today.
Absolutely. I was telling Fran before we got on that I was listening to her podcast, Courageous Conversations, which, by the way, I love the title. And just inspired by your story, I heard a little bit of your story and the impetus for starting your organization. But I want to go a little bit backwards and ask you, what did you want to be when you first started out? What did you want to be?
You mean as a child, as a young woman?
Career-wise, what were you thinking of?
I really wasn't, Simone. My mom is the youngest of 16, so you can imagine all the cousins that I have. I was raised in a very provincial Italian family where, I was lucky enough to graduate high school, and the idea was you get a job, you meet a nice Italian boy in Brooklyn, and you get married, and you stay there. And so my mom stopped talking to me when I went to college.
Really?
Because all the other girls in the neighborhood were getting married and making their mother's grandmothers at, 48 years old. And why couldn't I do that? And so I was just very focused on shifting the paradigm in my life and not living in, a shtetl, right? As much as I loved it, it was wonderful community, but it's not what I wanted. And so it was really, really, really work to get out of that, to break that cycle. And so I never thought about what I wanted to be. While I was in college, I raised a lot of money for a lot of different causes, and I loved doing that. But back then, nobody ever really talked to you about having a career in the nonprofit space. So I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I just kind of went along because I didn't really have role models, mentors, or guidance at that period in my life. So I kind of just went along for the ride.
What did you do? I love that story because I broke a paradigm in my family too. I was the first one to go to college, and I was on a secretarial path. Until a teacher intervened, and off to college I went. And it's a freeing feeling to change the legacy in your family. So I wonder what your mindset was like to just really stay on your path, because even though you got out and you're in this new surroundings, the mindset there, I know for me there was still a lot of work to be done. What about you?
Oh, absolutely. Because as I said, my mom was the youngest of 16. So you can imagine all the cousins I have. I am the only one to go to college besides two male cousins who went to school, I think, at night.
Wow.
So, and the impetus was this. I watched all of my mother's sisters be completely 100% dependent on my father. And wasn't the life I wanted. And I also never really thought about getting married, having kids, none of that. It was, to me, it was almost survival. It was almost survival. And so I did have a lot of support and encouragement from my dad. He was, I would say, probably my first mentor. But the catalyst, the inspiration, all of that was very similar to what you just said, actually. I was on a secretarial path in high school, right? You had the academic course or you could become a secretary. And I remember her name, Mrs. Calker. One of my teachers just said, you should think about going to college. And I wasn't even a great student. And so I did. And that's, I think, where I was, president of different clubs, president of Future Business Leaders of America, president of this. I started my own organizations on campus where I saw that there was a need. They became very successful. I think they may even still exist. And then I promptly did exactly what my family wanted me to do. Immediately after college, I got married.
So then did your mom start speaking to you again?
Yes, because then we were on a level playing field, right? We had something in common. Okay, she went to college, she got that out of her system, she got married. Now let's have a baby, have a baby, have a baby. So which I did, and then proceeded to have two, and then promptly got divorced. And so that was my inspiration for WBDC. I wanted my children to have a different life than I had. I wanted my daughters to be independent young women. And I had really nothing when I got divorced, except a lot of incredible girlfriends who were very educated, who had big jobs, who said, okay, we're going to help you. Let's figure this out. And I owe them, and we're all still in touch. I owe them a debt of gratitude because they helped me figure out that Connecticut was one of the only states, aside from Alaska, that didn't have a resource for women entrepreneurs. And so that's what entrepreneurs do. They solve a problem, right?
Yeah.
You know that.
I do. But I also know that the entrepreneurial path is not an easy one, and to stay focused, especially with children, to have to think about and provide for, it's not an easy path at all. So, excuse me, having the friends, you have to be pretty sharp to move that forward. So you've got to listen to the advice you're getting and take action on it to make the magic happen.
I do think that is a gift that I have. I'm always willing to learn and take guidance from others. And I think that's what a good leader does, is that they surround themselves with great people who know the things that they don't know, have the expertise in the things that they don't have. And again, necessity is the mother of invention. When you have two little girls that are 2 and 4 years old, and you have no source of income, and your only career experience was a short stint on Wall Street, and you just had a very large distaste for that, and you find something that's like, I could help people, it's business focused, it's women's empowerment, women's economic empowerment, which I was incredibly passionate about, having watched my mom's sisters be economically reliant on my father and my mother as well. And so kind of the stars just aligned, and kind of like these women were like my magic carpet, because as soon as we made this discovery, I was able to find a whole host of other women in Fairfield County who were really movers and shakers, and they're the ones who really helped me form WBDC.
What an inspiring story for me to hear as an entrepreneur as well. And we have so much in common. I wonder, Fran, when did you realize you were in the driver's seat? Because I'm making up stories from what I'm hearing, but I want you to tell me, when was the first time you realized you were in the driver's seat for your career?
Well, those early years at WBDC, I was nothing short of a wreck, right? You're trying to sell your product, which, to be honest, it was kind of fake it till you make it. I'm not going to lie. And that's what we tell, that's what I tell a lot of women when I talk to them. It's like, so put that aside, right? It was so beyond stressful. It was so beyond stressful. And so I had a great group of advisors, right? And one of these advisors, who's, a couple years older than me, a very accomplished lawyer, someone who I really respected a lot and was just like a gift in my life. I once said to her something like, Pat, Peg, these are really powerful women that we're going to talk to. And she turned to me and she said, girl, wake up. You're a powerful woman. You're pretty powerful yourself. And I was like, I am. I didn't know that. And so that was one experience, right? And I still was kind of a novice about thinking and believing that. But then I had the opportunity to work with Carla Harris.
Oh my gosh. I've been saying to myself, I'm sorry to interrupt, Fran, but let me just put a bookmark. And I said, who knows Carla Harris? Because I love her. Go ahead with the story.
She's amazing. She's amazing. And I highly recommend her books. And if you don't, whoever doesn't follow her on Instagram that's listening to this podcast should absolutely follow Carla's Pearls. But anyway, I somehow got appointed by our congressional delegation to the National Women's Business Council, and I had the opportunity to serve under Carla. It was great. Fast forward a few years later, I reached out to Carla and I said, it's WBDC's, I think it was our 20th anniversary. So this is only 5 years ago. So can you imagine, I've been doing this for 25 years and it's, maybe 20th anniversary. So it's like 19 years later. And I called Carla and I said, would you be our keynote speaker for our 20th anniversary? And she said, absolutely. I said, well, who do you think should be, we want it to be a Q&A. Who should interview you? And so she goes, you. And I said, Carla, I can't interview you. I'm not that skilled. And she said, girl, you hang up this phone, right? I'm hanging up this phone right now. You go have yourself a cup of coffee and you're going to interview me. Okay. And I was like, Carla, I can't do that. She goes, I'm hanging up now. And so that was a long time after You're Pretty Powerful, right? That was a long time after You're Pretty Powerful. So I think the answer to your question is that it's been an evolution for me. It's been an evolution. And I think that that's something that any entrepreneur has to keep in mind, or any person who wants to build their career. I think we all have those moments in our life. And I try to encourage both of my young daughters, who, by the way, are economically self-reliant and totally in the driver's seat in their jobs. And I think, I think we have to recognize that being in the driver's seat doesn't happen instantaneously, that it is an evolution. And there are times when we're going to feel like we are more confident than others. There are times when we're going to feel like you can wake up and you're like, the devil better watch out today because I am on a high, right? And then there are days when you wake up and you're like, oh man, I'm beat. Like, I don't know if I can handle this. Those are the hard days, right? But I feel like after 25 years, I feel like I'm finally in the driver's seat.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I really do. And I think a lot of that has to do with the ability to be adaptive and flexible and seek opportunities and do your best to look at challenges as a new opportunity and a new phase in career growth.
I have two follow-up questions to that. One, I love Carla Harris. I'll say it again. I love her TED Talk. I think it's amazing.
She's amazing.
Just such wisdom. I love that. And I want to give her a new book. She has a new book, right?
Yes.
So the question I would ask is, what do you believe is the formula or the key ingredients for successfully owning your career?
So something that I tell a lot of young women that I mentor, because I love to mentor young women, is that you need to form relationships inside of the organization. You need, and I honestly, this is something Carla told me and that she talks about all the time in her book and in her podcast and, in her keynote, is you need to, mentors are fantastic, right? Mentors are going to tell you, they're going to work with you. They're going to help you advance your career. Sponsors are going to tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think it's important to have both. And I think it's especially important to be that person that those mentors or potential mentors and potential sponsors want to work with, because it's very gratifying as a mentor or a sponsor. It's very gratifying to see that person use that guidance and develop and move on in their career path. So I think mentors and sponsors are critically important. I think people need to be asked. I think you need to look at people who have a career trajectory that you are interested in having, and not be bashful about saying, can I take you for a cup of coffee? And that's something that I have really encouraged my kids to do. And as a leader in WBDC, we have 30 plus employees now. They're mostly very young. And I want to do my best to support and encourage them as the leader of the organization, but also to help them, give them their wings. And, if they should leave, go and stay in touch and, do the thing that you want to do. So I hope that answered your question, because that was a lot. But I think mentors, sponsors, and ask for what you want, and don't be shy about asking, because I think that's the way to be in the driver's seat.
I love that. Let's piggyback on the ask, because some people struggle with the ask. How do I ask for what I want? When do I ask for what I want? Do you have some tips that you can give our audience on the art of asking or building those muscles?
I think you need the infrastructure in place first, right? So you need to have delivered. You need to have already delivered. You need to have already proven yourself. You need to already internally value yourself, right? I think we have a whole host of books by women that we all know out there, Mika, Brzezinski, know your value, right? I believe in that. I believe in asking for what you want, but I believe you also need to have the proof points, the data points, to say, here's what I've accomplished, and here's the research that I've done, and this is why, right? And if you don't get that, you have to be willing to walk away. I recently encouraged my older daughter, who was very, very, very unhappy in her job and did not have a lot of support in her role. And she wanted to leave. She wanted to go on a secondment with a client. And she didn't want to ask. She was terrified to ask. And so we talked through her accomplishments, her review. By the way, I believe strongly in performance evaluations. I believe that's an opportunity to really document your strengths and your accomplishments, because then you have the data points to refer to. So I really encouraged her to do that. And she was met with several obstacles, but because she had built the relationships internally with other people that were decision makers in the company, she ultimately ended up getting exactly what she wanted. And I'll go back to forming those relationships with everyone from the assistant, the executive assistant, the secretary, of the leadership. Across the board, you want to have those relationships and maintain them. And I think, to me, I'm so happy to share that example, because it took a solid 8 months to make that happen, but it happened, right? And so, I think what's really important is, in the end, it's relationship, the data points. I know at WBDC, the culture is one of, work hard, play hard. The minute somebody says, I can't go to this location because it's too much time, or it's too much this, or it's too much that, I'm like, this isn't really the right fit for you. So that'll be the last point that I make on this topic, Simone, is that know your capacity. Understand before you enter into a situation what you are up against. Ask a lot of questions, but listen very, very intently. So I hope that is helpful.
All of this is helpful. I wonder how lucky your daughters are to have you as a sounding board and to lead the way. I bet they're very proud of you.
Oh, thanks. I'm so proud of them. And Yeah, my little reward that I got 2 weeks ago was my daughter got into a doctorate program at Penn and came home with a mug and said, "This is for you, because this is why I'm here." And yes,
Oh,
I mean, like, I get chills even talking about it. But yeah, I'm really proud of them. And it wasn't easy. I mean, there were a lot of nights when we ate pasta for dinner, right? Pasta and chickpeas. So, and I tell that story a lot. But I feel like I've been given a gift. WBDC gave me a gift, and the women that we work with, including you, have been gifts in my life. Like, to watch these businesses thrive. Yeah, it's been a wonderful career.
I feel like I can cry. That's
Um,
beautiful. I'm a mom as well. I have a 7-year-old, so
oh,
that warms my heart. And it made me think of my coaching clients, how happy they make me when they fly. And so,
oh
yes,
yes.
I
They're
totally,
like, yeah, they're like your birds, right?
yeah, I love that. I love that. You mentioned the book, Know Your Value. Are there other resources that would be helpful to our audience in leveling up in their careers that you can recommend?
I am a big fan of Carla's books, both of them. The last two in particular, I give them as gifts all the time to young women. I'm remiss in that the names of those books are escaping me.
Sorry.
But I also love Mika's book. I think that's a really important book about self-confidence. And at WBDC, I think that's probably one of the biggest transfers that we give our clients, right, is confidence, because we need to believe in ourselves. As women, we're always taught to take a back seat. Don't talk too loud. You're asking for too much. I mean, my favorite two books are Carla's. I also just bought Huma Abedin's book.
I'm not.
So Huma is the Hillary Clinton's kind of partner. She was her chief of staff while she was in the White House. I just heard her speak. It was fabulous. That's not necessarily about career, but that's about her life, and it's very inspirational, and what she endured very publicly with her husband, who was a congressman in New York. You might remember.
I do know. Yes.
Yeah. And then I also just bought a copy of Gutsy, which is Hillary and Chelsea Clinton's new book. So those are very inspirational to me. Carla's books are more practical, like how-tos. But I think, I can't underscore enough how the inspirational and the confidence and hearing other people's stories impacts one's career. So those are the things that I like to read.
I think that's great advice. Find the inspiration, because it's so helpful to have that, to continue, to have this fuel to continue on your career journey. So thank you for reminding us about books like that they don't have to be career books. One of my favorite books is Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, which is a good reminder to move past the fear, because we do a lot of things in fear. Can you talk to us about risk and how we should package or frame risk when we think about careers?
So that's a really, really interesting question. I am not risk averse, right? If I were risk averse when I was a single unemployed mom, I would have went back to Wall Street, traveled on the train for 2 hours in each direction, left my kids, and probably wouldn't have to work for as many years as I have to work, because I would have had a nonprofit job. But so risk is so personal. I think I've taken so many risks, so many risks, including fake it till you make it. That's a big risk. That's a really big risk. But you have to know your risk tolerance, right? Just like when you're making your investments, your financial advisor asks you what your risk tolerance is. And so when you make that determination, how much you're willing to risk, you then have to put in the work. And that was a big decision that I made very, very early on. You know, my kids got on the school bus at 7 o'clock in the morning. I was on my computer in my pajamas. My kids got off the bus at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. They got their homework, they got their dinner. I worked until midnight. You know, I didn't have the money for a babysitter. I took the risk of saying I have to use my credit card to pay for childcare because I have to go to all these events. If I don't go to all these events, I'm not going to meet the people that I need to meet to grow this business. And so knowing your risk tolerance, thinking it through, taking calculated risks, talking to people who know more than you, have expertise in different areas, making very good decisions, weighing the risks. But also in the end, Simone, it's about putting in the work once you make that decision. And I remember those early days, my family saying to me, why are you doing this? Go get a job. This is so risky. What if this doesn't work out? And I don't think, we haven't talked about flexibility. We haven't talked about the need for flexibility, especially for women. But I think the pandemic has shown us how disproportionately women were impacted and how I knew back then that I needed and wanted a life with flexibility. And I think we've always known that. It's just that we understand it more now. So that also has to come into the risk weighing factors, right? You know, what kind of life do you want? No one ever talked to me about that. What kind of a life do you want? Do you want a house in the suburbs with a pool in your yard and a beach pass? Do you want to make sure that your kids go to college? Like, no one talked about that. And so I think risk comes along with planning and putting in the hard work. Does that make sense?
It does make a lot of sense. And even the flexibility comment, because I know one of the reasons that I remain an entrepreneur is the flexibility, because I don't have to ask permission to show up for my daughter when she needs me, or, you know, it just, just having to ask, I would go through this, oh my gosh, I got to ask my boss and I got to, you know, I need a day off, or and it gives me the flexibility to design and so absolutely. I could talk to you all day, Fran. I'm so appreciative of your time. Last question, as we wrap up the interview. If you haven't already written a book, but could write a book about your career body of work, what would the title be?
Oh man, Simone, wow, that's such a big question. You know, so the word that came right to my mind is women, just women. And I say that, and I think there's already a book. Actually, it's right here. See? I just, you know, and the reason I say that is because I've done a lot of traveling for work and taken the kind of work that WBDC does to a handful of countries, not many, but I've worked with women in Rwanda who survived genocide. I've worked with women in Costa Rica who, you know, live in clay huts. The issues that women face around the globe transcend socioeconomics. And they're all the same. And we all have the same desire. How best can we take care of our family and our community? And the issues that we all deal with may be on different levels, but they're all the same. And as we watch this world change before our eyes right now, and we watch rights that we have being rolled back, doesn't matter which side of the aisle you stand on. We're watching a war in Ukraine where who's being impacted the most? It's women and children. We watch what's happening in Sudan. We watch what's happening in countries around the world. The first people, whether it's by default, like war, or whether it's planned, like what we're seeing in the United States, women are always on the front lines.
Mhm.
And so I really believe that it is so time for women to take over across the globe, and espouse our virtues, which we haven't really been able to do because we live in a male-dominated society. So that's not a fun and exciting title, but it's the first thing that popped into my head, and it's my life's work is around women. And I really believe that as the leader of this organization, I am going to use my platform, my personal platform, and the platform of WBDCs to amplify the voices of women and help empower them economically so that they can be independent, because when they are, they will have a voice in the decisions that are being made for them and about them in society.
Mm.
Amen.
Amen. All right. I received that. Oh, it's so powerful. Your gift is amazing. What you do is amazing. And thank you for who you are, what you represent, and what you will continue to do for women. I am so inspired and grateful for this conversation.
Well, Simone, thank you for giving me the opportunity and for sharing your time with me. And my last piece of advice, I know you didn't ask for it, but I'm going to share it, is like, we cannot do it alone. So look around you at the gifts that you have around you, and you know, get people to believe in your vision and your mission and do the work, because I couldn't have done this without all of the fabulous men and women who supported this mission for so many years.
Wonderful. Fran, please tell our audience, if they would like to get connected with you, how they can do so.
Sure. The website is www.ctwbdc.org. If you go to the website, you can find out about our programs and services, and we have a grant program that people might be interested in. We have a childcare grant program also. And we're celebrating our 25th anniversary on October 28th. So if anybody would like to come, you can purchase tickets online.
Awesome. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much, Fran, for being a guest on the Power of
Bye, Simone.
podcast.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I sincerely hope that you enjoyed this week's empowering career story on the podcast. If you did, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Wherever you listen to the podcast, be sure that you are subscribing and that you rate and review the podcast. It's so important as we continue to spread the word of career empowerment. In addition, you can head over to the LinkedIn platform and join the Power of Owning Your Career discussion group. There you can have access to the guests who have been on the podcast, as well as others listening to the podcast, as well as myself, where we can continue the conversation. I hope to see you on that platform. You can also email me at pooyc@simonemorris.com if you have a suggestion for guest or a message that you want me to hear personally. Thanks so much, and make it an inspiring, empowering week in your career.